know about the Shade Room, right? It's a news and culture media company with over 30 million social media followers. And behind the brand is rock star woman entrepreneur Angelica Nwandu. Like any great entrepreneur, she made a lot of gut decisions to launch the brand. But as she scaled, data had to become her ally. When you start a business, how much should you rely on intuition versus data? They say that numbers don't lie, but they actually do. They can sometimes lead you in the wrong direction. But if you want to be a leader in business, you gotta make peace with the numbers, girl. It's a tricky balance, and I'm dying to know exactly how the Shade Room masters when to lean into intuition versus when to lean into the data.
So, Angelica, I know you started the Shade Room by you giving your hot takes on things happening in pop culture. And so I want to play a little game with you. I'm going to tell you the name of someone in popular culture, and you can give me like a caption, kind of like you would have on like a post that you would do on the Shade Room. Like, what would you say is the caption? What's your hot take on it? Okay, ready? Okay. Simone Biles.
Ooh, okay. Simone Biles clapping back at the haters is showing off her lifestyle. Hey.
Yeah, it's the clapback, the queen of the clapback.
The queen of the clapback.
Yeah. Okay, good. That was good. You were quick with that. Okay, let me give you one more. Kamala Harris.
Ooh.
What's the caption?
People criticizing Kamala Harris for smiling and laughing, saying that her Joy campaign is inappropriate for what's going on in America. I'm just going off of what are in the headlines right now.
This is good.
That's been the most recent thing in the headlines, is that people were criticizing her laughing, stuff like that.
When you started the Shade Room, were you doing a lot of like data analytics with the business, or was it more kind of intuitive like you just did, where you were like, here's the headline, here you go?
Actually, it was intuitive. I think that I was leading off of intuition up until maybe 3 years ago, or 2 to 3 years ago.
Okay, so how many years is that in then?
That's 7 years.
7 years in, mainly intuition. I think about my first business, and I definitely was not like, oh, I'm in the data, I'm in the details at the beginning. I was not doing that. I was just kind of like, what do I think people want? Here we go. And so you started with just an intuition approach, but like it didn't sound like you had an issue with numbers. You had like an accounting major, so like numbers.
I hated accounting though, but yeah, no, I didn't have an issue with numbers, but I did have a bias against data. I think that I was on the other side where I was like intuition only, because also I want to say that the intuition, there technically was data collection. It just wasn't in the traditional sense. Like, I would listen to the roommates, so I would listen to their comments. I would read their comments. I would go to their pages. I would see what kind of I knew my audience. Like, literally, I knew them. I would speak to them. I would talk to them. I would go to their pages. I would see what interests them. So there was some type of research, but it wasn't what you would traditionally look at as data collection. But it was a form of data collection. So I used to be so bullheaded when it came to intuition that I just thought I could run an entire business and scale it with intuition only. That was my viewpoint. You had seen Steve Jobs talk about how intuition was so amazing and how he got a lot of his ideas through meditation and and spending time in solitude. Henry Ford, you know what I mean? So many people, the owner of Netflix, so for me, I was pushing that intuition was all I needed until it wasn't enough. That's when I changed.
And I think in some ways, intuition is not a bad thing. Like, as women and as women leaders, we have so much intuition. We've got like an extra layer of intuition that we can tap into. So I'm kind of hearing you talk about, though, that like you started and you were listening to your audience. It's not like you were like ears closed, la la la, I'm not listening. You were listening to them. You call them the roommates?
The roommates, because we're always in a together, so we might as well be roommates.
Yeah, that's the community.
And that was a name that came from the audience. It was one follower who said, you should call us it was at the time where Rihanna had the Navy, Nicki Minaj had the Barbs, and so they were like, we feel like this is like an army. So they were like, you should call us something. And she said, you should call us the roommates. And I took that. You know what I'm saying? So all of that was intuition.
Again, you weren't like, what's the survey? I'm going to send out a survey and give you 4 options and you vote on what you want to be called. You just are listening to what people are saying.
Exactly.
But it sounds like things kind of switched. Like you went from being intuition based, but I'm kind of hearing you say like past tense. Are you still running the business very much intuition centered, or have things kind of changed?
I don't think honestly, I think that the best leaders do continue to use intuition, right?
Yeah.
So data by itself is useless in my opinion, right? If you just look at numbers, it can be useless. I think what we need to focus on is data insights. That's the thing that is most important. And that takes more than just looking at numbers, because numbers can be misleading in a lot of cases, right? And so for me, I feel like there's always going to be, even if you have data, you still need to use intuition to decide how you're going to combat those insights. How are you going to solve an issue? There's so many different options and ways that you can go to solve an issue that it presents itself through data. So I think that you still are going to need intuition to move and decide which way is the right way. You know what I mean? And I feel like the only way to have real intuition is to have a genuine passion and interest for what you do and an inclination to what you do. And then you have that superpower in business is my viewpoint.
Yeah, that distinction you make between like data and an insight is really important. I actually think of it as like the data is supposed to tell a story. And if you're not like able to tell a story around it, then you have not translated it into an insight. That's the bridge between data and insight. So if I think about like an example of this, like Peloton, the like software company and also bike company, like they did this study and got this data point that if someone works out 2 times a week, they are 30% less likely to cancel their subscription, which 30% is a lot less likely to cancel subscription. So what they did was with that insight, with that story, right? Because just like the number is not that helpful, but framing it into an insight of like people are more likely to do this thing if they've done this. They're less likely to cancel if they've done 2 workouts a week. Okay, well, let's gamify it. Let's like make it so that we know the goal is to incentivize you to get to 2 workouts a week, and everybody can be like marching towards that North Star. That's an example of like, I think what you're saying of like data, but then turning it into an actual insight that you can act on.
Right, exactly.
Have you seen that show Super Pumped about Uber? It's like the story of Uber. Have you seen that?
I haven't, but I am familiar with the Uber CEO who did use intuition. I believe he used intuition when he created surge pricing, right?
Yeah, I think there's so many scenarios where he did both. And I think like to your point, it's not just one or the other, because I think there's a trend where like you start largely with intuition, and then at some point you start to get data points that if you can turn them into insights become important. I think there's actually something to be said about like what is at the beginning and what's important at the beginning and what's being important as you scale being totally different. And so many times we're trying to like collapse those things. We're trying to like do the thing that's scalable at the beginning, and then we're getting all caught up in it. But I remember in that show, he's talking to an investor, and the investor is like, talk to me about like what makes it, like, are people going to use it? And he's like, we found out that if we can get someone to ride twice, we have them for life. And that core metric, I've said that to my team, like I've like played that clip of that video, that like what we're looking for is specific metrics that like tell us something about the user behavior that's like an insight, not just a data point. Like don't just give me numbers, tell me a story about it. And like those are examples. Peloton's like 2 times a week, Uber is 2 times ride, and we've got them for life. Those are kind of like examples of insights.
Right, yes.
So what is one insight that you've kind of pulled out about your business, something you've like learned about the audience, about what people want, that has kind of helped you steer the ship?
Okay, so I'll say that, there's so many. Where do I start? What's a good one? Where do I start? Okay, so one insight is that the roommates typically, like the average roommate, and this is going to sound really crazy, but the average roommate opens up the Shade Room, like social media Instagram page 33 times a day, right? Woo! And so that sounds crazy when you hear it, but you have to think about how many times the average user opens up Instagram. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know what that metric is, right?
I'll be on that app way too much. Just
exactly.
way too much.
So Yeah, so what we saw was that when they go on Instagram, typically they'll go to the shade room just to check the updates.
Immediately.
So it informs us on how many times to post. Because if they're coming on 33 times a day, then they're looking for 33, you know what I mean? Like at least 33 new
pieces,
updates, right?
yeah.
Exactly. And so we post 30 to 40 times a day. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like every time they come on, we're giving them something new to look at, right? And so those type of insights definitely help us in how to maneuver the business, right?
That's such a good insight, because so many people are worried about like, oh, I'm going to post too much. People are going to hear from me too much, because they think that every single post that you post, someone's going to see. But we know that the reality of the algorithm is that most people don't see what you post, each individual post. They're going to see some combination. But if you have the insight of how frequently your audience is coming to the page, that tells you how much to post. What's one more?
One more?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because that was a really good one.
There's so many more. Like, I mean, we know what our audience likes. We know what that they love relationships. We know that, you know what I mean? They love politics. We know that they love these certain things. And so we have literally tailored our content to match what they like. At first, we were just doing celebrity content, celebrity news.
Yeah.
And then we realized that they were using us in a bucket for celebrity news, and then they would go off of our site and go to other sites to fulfill their other needs, right? They couldn't get politics from us. They couldn't get business news from us. They couldn't get dating relationship conversations from us. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so because of that, we started to tailor into what their interests were outside of the platform, and then we began to feed them that as well, increasing the overall engagement and time spent on our site.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you say that it kind of created a blueprint of what the expansion strategy should be too, because you know what else people want. The company Glossier did something really similar to this, because they had just makeup products, and then they did a post on like skincare routines, and they were noticing that when they would post about skincare routines, they would see like a 25% increase in engagement, and that led them to be like, oh, actually maybe people would want skincare products from us too, not just makeup products, but also skincare. And it informed their actual like product development strategy, because they're looking at those data points of what people are engaging with. Sounds like you're doing the same thing. Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that there's this place for intuition, and that maybe like more place for intuition, like we got to put more respect on intuition's name than we're doing right now. Like, who are some impactful leaders that you know of that like do use intuition well? Like if we think about like people in maybe even personal brands that do this well.
They use intuition really well?
Yeah, that you like. You're like, oh, I like it.
Kim Kardashian. I'm sorry. If people look, let me tell you something. I want people to put respect on Kim Kardashian's name. I mean, you ain't gotta put all the respect, because I understand people gripes with her. But
I
one
like
thing
Kim
that you
K.
have to. Yeah, because people will always say, "Oh, Kim K doesn't have talent." I'm like, okay, you build $1 billion business, and you maneuver social media influencing and be a pioneer in that, and then let's see how it works. You know what I mean? Like everybody can't do that, right?
Let's see how you do.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like Kim Kardashian and even Kylie Jenner at one point had a really good intuition. Like what data could tell you that, turning lemon into lemonade with your lip scandal, with everybody talking about your lips, and because it was a lot of negative feedback about her lips, right? Even though, but she saw the truth in it, that people were trying to doing challenges on social media to kind of try to emulate that, but there was an overall negative feedback from the general public about what was going on. But she said, okay, well, I'm going to come out and I'm going to show you how I do my lips in a safe way. You understand what I'm saying? And then it was crazy. Kim Kardashian knows that we look to her for beauty, and we know that we've seen her, the extremes that she goes on red carpets to look snatched. You know what I'm saying? So it was only, intuition and listening to your audience that would tell you should go into skin. You should do shapewear, because now we trust you. We're like, okay, Kim's gonna make sure that our waist is snatched. You understand what I'm saying? And so I feel like when I see a lot of artists artists go into business, a lot of times there's just this disconnect, right? And nothing on B, because I love B, right? I love B. But to give you an example, we look at B. I don't know anybody that has ever thought that B had natural hair. You know, I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we never knew what her natural hair looked like.
I love how you talk about Beyonce like she your girl, like B, you know, you were just first letter basis. I'm with you, yes.
No, but I'm saying, like, I love B. But I'm like, we never knew that she had long hair. We thought it was a wig. And we were trying to figure out what kind of lace front is that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like, so when she came out with the sacred natural hair, everybody, it was such a shock because we're like, wait a minute, we didn't even know you had real hair. Then she put her hair out and she has these long tresses. But we were like, people were still like, is that a wig? Like, is that, you know what I mean? Or whatever, because we're like, we don't know you for natural hair. You get what I'm saying? And so that's where you can look at insights and data and say, okay, well, the natural hair care industry is $1 billion industry. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Black women love natural hair care. And you can say this is a great business to venture into, but then there's this intuition that's kind of missing because there's a disconnect with the audience where we don't go to you for that. Now, if you had a makeup spray, well, what's that finishing spray?
Yeah, the finishing spray. Yeah.
Yeah, I would buy that because I've been wondering how you don't sweat on your makeup off when you're doing all these crazy.
That's so interesting.
You know,
or even like I've looked up like the tights that she wears because when she's dancing, there's no jiggle at all. I'm like, how are you doing that?
Okay, so this is what we look to Beyonce for, and I feel like it's, you know, there's that intuition that could be used in that to kind of really hit and know what your audience wants from you. You know what I mean? So
this is so interesting because I can parallel it to some entrepreneurs that I know who are starting out right now, and they're trying to figure out what kind of business they should start and what kind of business they should do. And I think that the few friends that I have that I'm thinking of, they don't 100% know their zone of genius and what just like their other friends in our friend circle look to them for. So I think that there's so many opportunities of like businesses that they could start. I have a friend who's just like extremely empathetic, a really good listener, a really good, like everybody goes to him to be able to sort of like share where they are, what's going on, to talk through problems. And I think there's so many business opportunities for him by leveraging that skill set. But you're right, you have to be like intuitively connected to what other people see as your, like, come to you for. I think when we think about like bringing it back to businesses that folks are running, because folks who watch this show and listen to this show are running a business or thinking about starting a business. And I want to talk about like the top 2 metrics that they should be tracking for their business. So I have some thoughts, but I want to hear what you think about this, and maybe you can kind of like throw in some other opinions. So I think that depending on what kind of business you have, right? You could have a product business, you could have a content business, you could have a software business, you could have different kinds of businesses. Maybe different metrics are more important than others if you are going to start kind of collecting and circling on data. So I think if you have a product business, one metric that's really important is like gross margin. So the gross margin is like the amount that you charge for a product minus how much it costs for you to make the product. And then you kind of like divide it by the amount you charge. So if like the product costs $100 and it costs you $60 to make it, then the 100 minus 60 is $40. That's how much you make in pocket. And so your gross margin is 40%, the 40 divided by 100, right? And like knowing what that margin is of like how much you get to keep is so important, because you don't want to go to, if you have a product and a manufacturer, you don't want to go to a manufacturer that charges you more than you can sell for it, or you only make $2 or 5 cents for everything. So I think if you have a physical product, like that gross margin is super important, but maybe a little bit different than like your business, where like there's not a lot of course you have to do things to produce the content, but you're not like making a physical product in that sense.
Yeah, but I think that, so when you're dealing with a product business, gross margin is extremely important, because if you're not making money on your product, then you don't want to mass produce it, right?
Yeah.
I also think gross revenue is important for every business. You know what I'm saying? Because if you're not making money on your business, then is it a business? You know, there needs to be some sort of profit there, right? So I think that that's important even for me, because you know, even though like a lot of times we do sell products at times, but a lot of times we're not in the product game, we're in the content game. But I still look at content as product. Why? Because there's still overhead and you know, expenses associated with producing content. I got to think about how many writers I have on staff. You know what I mean? I have to think about if we're doing branded content, like what's the cost of filming and production. You understand what I'm saying? So still, for me, I still have to have like gross revenue as a big, you know, overarching thing, because I have to make sure that what I'm doing is producing revenue.
No,
you know,
that totally makes sense, because for every business, your gross revenue is like how much you brought in. So let's say for your content business, you do a brand deal and a brand comes to you to sponsor content. There's the amount that they paid you, and then there's the cost that it actually cost you to produce it, to do it, to get it out there. And you have to take how much they paid you minus how much it costs and make sure you're still making that gross profit. And of course, there's other costs.
And if you want to go further, opportunity cost. You understand what I'm saying? So,
say more about that. How do you think about the opportunity cost in that?
Opportunity cost. So like when we think about, like for instance, I may have a big fashion brand come to me, right? You know, let's say a Fashion Nova, or I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Or maybe like a Pretty Little Thing. Let's say they come to me and they say, hey, I'm going to pay you for X amount of posts a day, right?
Right.
And then also I'm going to pay you extra to make it an exclusive deal between us. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Now I have to decide, okay, what is the opportunity cost here? If I'm going exclusive with you in this deal, while up front it's a lot of money and it looks, you know, enticing, but I might be losing Pretty Little Thing, I might be losing Boohoo, I might be losing all of these things. What is my revenue? You know what I mean? Like there's different research, and it's not just about cost all the time. Sometimes it's about opportunity cost. You have to think about it. Or if you have a deal come in and they're paying you, but you have to kind of analyze how much time is this taking from my team to produce this content? You know what I mean? Is this going to take, you know, how much energy and time are they spending on this project for what we're bringing in versus what they could do with 5 other clients? You understand what I'm saying?
100%. 100%. And you have to think a lot about, like, this is a good example if you have like a difficult client, for example. Like the client takes up a lot of energy from the whole team. They're really draining. Exactly. Like sometimes the cost of serving a really difficult client then becomes that you can't even serve a bunch of other people. You don't have your mental, you know, sanity because they're driving you nuts. So you can't work on the next kind of forward thinking thing. So I like that you're adding that in about thinking about the opportunity or kind of other opportunities it takes away. So yeah, that's a good one. Kind of the gross margin, opportunity cost. I think if you have a service business or an agency of sorts, one metric that you could be tracking is called utilization rate. And so utilization rate is essentially like, am I or my team, if you have a team, actually spending time on things we can charge the client for? Or am I spending my time on a bunch of other stuff that I can't actually make money from? Because typically when you have an agency, you might charge by the hour, or you have like a package that someone buys, either way. So like a utilization rate would be like, okay, let's say you have a cleaning business and you spend 30 hours a week cleaning out of your 40 hours, and then like 10 hours doing administrative stuff. Not that you can't really charge the client for it. Client's just paying for the cleaning, right? So you have 30 hours divided by the total 40 hours. It's like a 75% utilization rate. So 75% of your time is being used that you can actually charge clients for. Okay, not bad. If you find that like 10% of your time is being used for what you can actually charge clients for in an agency or a service business, you might have an issue. Right, it's taken too much administrative time to do other stuff. So that's a number. Do you guys?
But that's also, not to interrupt, but that's also a place where data comes in and you have to have insights. Because I remember a time in business when this seems so simple, but I'm a cheapo. I used to, like, you know what I mean? I'm cheap in my real life. You know what I mean? Like, I'm cheap, right? I mean, I spend on certain things, and certain things I'm just, cheap on. So and I'm very resourceful, right? Because we're bootstrapping. So we're not taking a lot of investment money or any investment money at all anymore. You know what I'm saying? We only took one investment. Small investment. So for me, I have to be resourceful in the way that I build the business. I remember hiring my sales head of revenue, and he was saying, hey, we need a budget for traveling and taking clients out to eat. And I mean, they would go to these nice restaurants and have these wonderful steak dinners. And I'm talking about that. I'm talking about, these people were spending black cards. You know what I mean? And I would be like, I'm looking at the expenses. I'm just looking at the numbers. And I'm like, wait a minute, no, like I didn't see the deal come in, this month to justify you understand what I'm saying? But the data would
100%.
show. The data will show that when we court our clients, when we treat them right, when we give them steak and all of this, that they are like 50 times more likely, right, to spend over 100,000 over the budget, of what we were originally negotiating, 100 to 200,000. Right. So when you see, so then I'm looking at the receipts of a $20,000, courting fee, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it's like, but it's worth it for you. You know what I'm saying? So even when you're looking at like the utilization rate, what is actually increasing the bottom line in the long run that you may look at now and say, well, this doesn't quite, dollars and cents aren't adding up, but in the long run, by the end of the year, it's worth it. So
that's a good point. So looking at if you have utilization of time that you can spend to charge clients, and you're looking at the other time that you're not charging clients, what are you doing with that time? Are you doing email stuff that you could have an assistant really easily help you with, or are you driving the business forward, maybe courting new clients, maybe coming up with a plan for expansion? Because that time is worth something different than maybe like time that's not as productive. You were talking about investors, and it made me think about I've run two companies. My first company, we went the investor route and raised money. And my second company, I decided to bootstrap. That was not the way that I wanted to go. And I think there was a big difference in just culturally, like when you're in that culture of raising money for the business, there is this trend that happens where people focus on metrics and numbers that are going to impress investors as opposed to the metrics and numbers that are useful for driving the business. Like if I think about myself running my first business, like the metrics that I was spending a lot of time on were like, okay, what are the monthly growth rate, which like when you're small, like the monthly growth rate is not actually that relevant in a way, because like if you're growing a good amount, like the number just really big, but it sounded impressive to investors. So I was like really focused on like, what are the investor numbers? And when I moved to bootstrapping, like the types of numbers that I was spending time thinking about were really different. It was like, what are the ways that we're being profitable? If we're not being profitable this month, like how are we reinvesting back into the business? Like those were metrics that the investors didn't really care about, but those were like, as an operator of a bootstrap business, really important metrics. So that made me think about how like the metrics that we track based on the goals that we have as a business are actually really different based on what you're trying to do.
Well, I've always been told that like if you have to know as a business owner, founder, CEO, you have to know what your end game is, because how you build a business to exit, how you build a business to exit, and how you build a business that you want to keep for the long run are two different things. Really, you're building your business so that it looks good on paper to investors, and that's a whole different type of business that you're building versus building a business to keep. You know what I mean? And to be
bootstrapped and profitable and solid, right? Yeah, 100%. You're like growth rate, like you're not thinking about profit at all. Like here's how sexy it is versus like here are the fundamentals. Yeah, I had to really learn that. And to be honest, I had to stop hanging out with some of my, like I'm in tech, so I had to stop hanging out with some of my tech startup friends who were really immersed in the like, I care about the sexy numbers and like presenting everything right for investors. I had to stop hanging out with them for a minute so I could get my mind right around different kinds of metrics and numbers and data that bootstrappers needed to pay attention to. Like I had to do a mental shift for myself around that.
Yeah.
So when you think about the Shade Room, like we were talking about metrics that people can track for their own business. So when you think about the Shade Room, like what are some metrics that are important to you and to the team?
Right. So, I mean, the metrics that are important to me, you'll see a lot of media companies putting a lot of emphasis on these metrics. Yeah. So the first thing is impressions, right? That's how many times your content is actually being put in front of people. You know what I mean? For people to scroll by, you know what I mean? Things of that nature. Then you have reach, which is very important, how many people your content is reaching. Then you have engagement rate. Engagement rate is super important to me. However, engagement rate is a tricky metric that you got to kind of be mindful of, because I can get to that later, but engagement rate is big. Click-through rate is really important as well, especially if you're trying to build a website. You want to make sure that your audience is not just coming on for one article and hopping off. You know what I mean? You want to make sure that they're clicking through it and that they're, reading other articles. Time spent on the website is very important. And I would also say audience growth is very huge for me as well.
Yeah. And it sounds like the reason these numbers are important is because your paying customers, your advertisers, those are the numbers that they want to see. And so the better those numbers are, the more it drives revenue. They're not just kind of like numbers just to be cute. That's what they're connected to, it sounds like.
That's true. And that is number one. But I think number two is also that I want to make sure that the audience loves what we do. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to make sure that our content is resonating on social media and across all platforms. And that's how I know, when you start to see those numbers dwindle, or when you start to see them, become stagnant, then you know that there's something that needs to be done in the business to continue to push the content or revise the content. You know what I mean? So that it's resonating better.
What are the tools that you use or your team uses to track these things? Like, are you going on the social platforms and just looking at their analytics? Like, how are you tracking this?
So we have API connections where we are able to put on all of our social platforms and, to do that. We also have a data research and analytics team that personally goes in and does the research for us. But we use Parsley, we use Dashboard. We have a team called Wrangle, shout out to Wrangle, that are our personal team that just goes in and does research in-house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Analytics and data as well.
That's really good. You said APIs, and I want to geek out for a minute because I think that's such a good way to get a clear screenshot of what's going on in the business. Because the reality is that most of us have a lot of different softwares, a lot of different tools, a lot of different platforms we're using for the business. And so an API, if you're listening to this and you're don't know what that is, it's just a way for two pieces of software to talk to each other. So it's like a phone call. One piece of software is hey, I got more information. And the other one's got it, thanks. It's that phone call. Mm-hmm. And so I really there's two tools that I really like for seeing the metrics of my own business. Mixpanel, I really like, which you mentioned some kind of competitor similar tools, which has is the centralized place where we put all the data. And then we will use, if there's not the software that we're trying to connect into Mixpanel doesn't have an integration already, then we will use Zapier.com to connect it. So Zapier is every time someone does something, it makes that phone call and sends it over to Mixpanel. It's hey, this person did this thing. So on Mixpanel, we have this events list of everything that someone does. So the events could be a page view. It could be, for my business, a free class that someone signs up for. It could be attending a class that they signed up for. It could be applying for a sales call, attending a sales call, making a purchase, all of these things. There's a feed. At any point, I can pull up my phone and I can see a feed of activity that everybody's doing, right, related to the business. And then I can start tracking. And so those are kind of the marketing metrics. There's also fulfillment metrics of someone booked a call with one of the account managers on our team, or they completed an app, or they completed a lesson. Those are things we're tracking in that feed. And then I can do data and analytics on it to see what percent of people that do this do that. And so having that centralized dashboard, I kind of wish I had done that earlier. I was in the intuition for a while, and that was cool, but at least getting everything centralized in one place so I could do the analysis on it later. I think I pay $30 to $40 a month for Mixpanel, and I run a multi-million-dollar business. So it's not that expensive. It wasn't that expensive to set up and do. And I wish I had that and been a little bit more data-centered when I started. Do you wish you had been more data-centered, or you're no, I think the way I did it was right?
I don't have any regrets because I don't have any regrets, honestly. I think that we did a really good job building on intuition in the beginning. Yeah. But I do think that you hit a wall just using intuition. There comes a time where your intuition just can't figure out certain problems. You know what I mean? And you need more information. And so I would say that I wish I did it before I hit a wall. You know what I mean? Because I probably wouldn't hit that wall, right? But I hit a wall and I said, okay, intuition isn't quite going to gonna cut it. You know what I mean? And so I was like, I need analytics. I need something more to help me tell this story better.
How did you know you were at that wall? Like what told you, okay, I've hit this?
I'll give you an example, right?
Okay.
So we used to do millions of dollars in small business revenue, right? And
like small business advertisers, you mean?
Yes, small business advertisers,
Okay.
right? And I used to, and I did a little research, and I knew that Black businesses love to advertise with and spend money with Black media companies because Black, audiences were more likely to buy product from Black businesses that were featured on Black media companies. You understand what I'm saying? Like there was a trust. It was like this cycle. And so in my mind, I was like, yeah, you know what I mean? Small business, right? So I'm investing resources into small business, trying to continue to grow that. But then there was a time where things changed. You have Google and now you're competing with Facebook and Instagram and Google. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're providing solutions to small businesses that, are just hard to compete with, right?
They can kind of outprice you. Google can beat you on pricing on an ad, for example.
They could beat you on pricing on it. Exactly. Yeah. And so for me, I was like, okay, we saw a big drop in small business, and our head of revenue was like, well, let's pivot to agency business, right? Yeah. And he's like, listen, the time that we're spending, because small business, I love y'all, but I mean, like it's a lot more time consuming. you understand what I'm saying?
It's a lot easier to run an enterprise business than it is work with a small business as a client or an individual in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so there, he's like, the time, like it would be more beneficial and fruitful if we pivoted towards agency business, and they have less of a volatile response to the economy, right? You understand what I'm saying? Than small businesses do. And so all I'm looking at is, aside from obviously agency business is going really well for us, but all I'm looking at the bottom line. I'm like, we went from millions of dollars to this, you know what I mean? A small business. We need I was throwing resources at small business to bring it up, but I didn't understand what small businesses really and truly needed from us to even compete with a Facebook and an Instagram. My intuition can't tell me that. You know what I'm saying? Like I needed analytics, I needed data to tell me that, right? And so once we started to do the data, we realized that the only way we can compete with Facebook and Instagram and all these other places is because the small business, and this was something that was kind of like counterintuitive for me, because I felt that small businesses just wanted sales. I mean, you think about it, they have a limited budget and they're giving you money. I'm thinking they just want to see their money double, or you know what I mean, or whatever it is. They want to see a return on their dollars. But when we did the data and the analytics and the focus groups and all that, we found that it wasn't so much about getting a return on their money as much as it was about brand awareness. And that was what they felt we could offer them that was different. They trusted our voice, they trusted our influence in the community, and they were like, we want brand awareness from you guys. So if you guys can do this and this, and we figured out different things that we could do to kind of give them more of an incentive to spend with us. But at the end of the day, the analytics showed that that wasn't even the place where I should have been throwing all those resources at. I just saw the numbers dip, and I'm like, I got to throw resources at that. But really, it's better to throw resources at agency business because of the volume that agency business brings in, the customer loyalty. You know what I mean?
The check size.
They're much consistent. You know what I'm saying? The opportunity for growth. You know what I mean? It's just, and so I think that that taught me, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to use intuition to solve these issues in the company. Like, that's just ridiculous, right? And I just thought I was some guru. Like, oh, no, I'm a culture savant. Like, I know this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, like, you have to understand that you don't know what you don't know. And no matter how you think you know your audience, there are things that you learn about them through insights. You know what I mean? And so data insights. And so So I was like, yeah, let me start changing up how I'm doing this business.
Hearing you talk about this is bringing up my own traumatic experiences about scaling and like goofing stuff up. And I actually think like when you talk about the wall that you hit where you're like, I can no longer just do this on intuition. I think I saw my own wall when I would start making decisions in the business and then have to undo the decision because it was the wrong decision. And that, I think, seeing that pattern in myself was like, first of all, girl, I had to have a conversation with myself. Like, maybe you don't know what you're doing here. Maybe they're kind of the thing you're trying to do is you scale. Like, you need a new set of skill sets, a new set of ways of making decisions. If you're making decisions and having to like frequently reel them back and do something different, oh, we're going to add this, we're going to remove this. Oh, wait, actually, no, that wasn't the right decision. Like, I actually think about my own walls. And that's when I knew that I was hitting them, when I had to start reversing course. When it also sounds like there's not just you making decisions and it's not just you looking at the numbers. Like not everybody necessarily is at scale where they have teams helping them, but it sounds like you have other people helping you. Do you think that it's an entrepreneur's job to like be responsible for the data themselves? And maybe if you're not a data person, you just got to become a data person?
It depends on your situation, honestly, to be real with you. It depends on your situation, because I can't tell somebody who can't afford to have a team, go get somebody that does that better than you. Like, what are you going to tell them? Let's be realistic. This is you know what I mean? They have a lack of resources. And so, yes, in that case, you do have to I would say you need to get platforms that can do it for you. But you have to be resourceful. I mean, and honestly, I don't know if it's realistic in the beginning to focus so heavily on data. You get what I'm saying? Like, to be real with you, I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Like, you can talk to a lot of people about that. Let's talk about building a business when you only have like $500 in your account. You know what I mean? Like, let's talk about that. You know what I mean? Because that's where a lot of people are starting. So, you got to make it do with what you have, right? So I would say in the beginning, you do have to be a jack of many trades. I mean, I had to be
wear
an
all the
accountant
hats.
at one point. I had to be a salesperson. I had to be, you know what I mean? You have to have wear many hats and kind of make it work with what you have. What else can I tell you? But if you are at a place where you can have a team, I would say if you're trying to be the entrepreneur that does everything, then you're going to reach burnout and you're going to be so tired. You're going to hate your business. Don't do it. You know what I mean? Like, I am not a logistics person, and I'm not going to even take the time, and energy that it would take to make me, the best in logistics. Why would I do that to myself? That's torture. That's pain. Why would I do that to myself? I know that I'm a creative and a visionary. I know that that's what I do really well. So I'm going to hire people who are just logistics freaks and love logistics, you know what I mean? So that they can be the proper, they can be the yin to my yang. You understand what I'm saying? And like, I don't like numbers. So I'm going to hire a team that does numbers really well. And so that they can feed me insights. And from the insights that I have, I can make intuitive decisions, right? So I'm not going to, I'm not that type of person. I feel like there's certain things that you need to push yourself to do, but then other things that are just so against your nature. And literally, like for instance, and not to be talking too much, but I was on the phone. I was working out with a friend of mine. She has a really big business, right? She loves building software. You understand what I'm saying? She loves building software. But for 3 years, in the beginning of her business, she built software and she was so in love with her business. Then now she gets to a place where she has to talk to investors. Right. And she has to bring clients in to, you know what I mean?
And the job is different now. What you do day to day changes.
Exactly. And we were talking and she's like, why do I feel so fatigued? She's like, why do I feel so burnt out? She's like, I literally I'm losing passion. I'm losing discipline. She doesn't even want to like show up to work. You understand what I'm saying? I said, well, what is it? I said, what changed? She said, well, I was focusing on software and on these things, the creative aspects of it and the tech aspects of it. And now I'm focusing on talking to. I said, stop talking to them. You don't need to stop talking to these investors.
Because you get to craft the role. You get to craft the role that you want to have as CEO. Like I think sometimes it's so easy to think like, oh, CEO means this one thing and I can only do that. And so I believe that CEOs have to be the ones looking looking at the data. But if that's not your thing, then maybe that's just not your thing. I think you're right, though. If you don't have resources, it becomes harder. There's one little kind of workaround I really like if you are not a super data person and you're wearing all the hats, so you've got to figure out what's going on with the data, which is to like load up your spreadsheet or like paste your data into ChatGPT and ask it to tell you a story. Tell you a story about what the data is saying, give you like 5 core insights about what it's saying, and maybe like 5 example decisions you could make in story format, like you were talking to a 10th grader, for example, and give you a story about it, because it'll synthesize the data. And at least you can then go and like take it back to your team and say like, is this right? It kind of helps you guide the questions that you're asking if you don't have a big old team and like a whole data department.
Yeah, create systems where you can still outsource for cheaper. You understand what I'm saying? Is basically what you're saying. Is still create those systems. It's going to be a cheaper resource. You understand what I'm saying? Than like having a full team. Right. But whatever you can do to offset that. But I do not believe in telling, entrepreneurs like, there's so many, there's so many rules that people put on entrepreneurs that I just don't agree with.
Yeah.
And everybody differently. Like, do you have to wake up at 5? Listen, let's say you're a night owl. You know what I'm saying? You're a night owl. That's when you want to get all your work done. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, okay. But why do we have to all be the same?
I hit that 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. second wind, and like I can like be really productive. And there's a certain kind of thinking that I do at that time. I'm not a morning person. So yeah, like we all have different things that work for us in different ways. Oh, I want to invite folks who are listening to this and watching this to participate in the conversation. So if you currently have a business, if you come to YouTube, we can see the comments. Tell us like what's 1 or 2 metrics that you are really looking at for the business, like that you're tracking. And if you don't have a business yet and you kind of want to start a business, what kind of metric could you track to kind of get you started thinking about data on that process? The one thing I want to also talk to you about, though, is not just like data around entrepreneurship, but like what if you have a job? Right, like you have a 9-to-5 job, and data also can come into the conversation for you. Like we talk about being bosses on this show, but there's a lot of ways to be a boss. You don't have to just run your own business. You could run a department or run an initiative at your company, at the company that you work for. And so I think that everybody who has a boss should know, like, what are the top 2 metrics that my boss is incentivized by? Like if your boss gets a bonus for hitting a certain number, you better know that, so you can align yourself to that. Or if your boss gets a performance review based on 1 or 2 numbers, you better know those numbers, because your whole goal is like helping them go to hit those numbers and to achieve that thing. If you think about like your own team, what would you say are like the top 2 metrics they should know that you're thinking about every day so they can align themselves with you and your goals?
I would say that for me, what would impress me the most, this is what to me is like a C player from different. This is what differentiates a C player from an A player, right? Okay. You understand what I'm saying? Because their job is content, right? People who do, and I don't know if you would call this a metric, but people who look at content, right, and they are figuring out how that adds to the bottom line.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying? Like how, like when they're looking at content and they're saying, hey, this piece of content can drive revenue for the company, right, and also create basically create new revenue streams. Yeah. That's what, like, when you start talking that talk to me, it's like you speaking French. You understand what I'm saying?
You're like, ooh, I like that.
I love that language. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's go.
Yeah.
You're speaking that good talk to me.
A player language.
Okay. Exactly. And I think that a lot of times, we have to see the boss and employee relationship like symbiotic relationship in a sense, right? It's because the better you help the company do, if you have an integral boss, the better you help the company do, the better I do for you. We do for each other. You know what I'm saying? If you're adding to the bottom line, if you're finding new revenue streams, if you're finding a way to increase revenue, I think that's going to be top for everybody, right? Is that I'm going to definitely find a way to make, to make sure that you're thriving here, to make sure that, you know what I mean, you have more opportunities and career growth and all of that. I want you to say. And so I would say that would be a top one. And then also another one would be impression and reach. Honestly, you get what I'm saying? If you find a way to gain more impression and reach or even engagement, to me, these are the things that are most important to me in the business. If you find a way to align with that and make sure that your work is tailored toward that, I mean, there's nothing you can't. I always tell my staff, there's nothing you can't ask me. There's nothing you can't ask me. Listen, I will entertain, grandiose conversations with you if you can do that. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, look, I like an 18 player, period, and that's what it is.
Yeah, I think the two metrics that my team should know that I'm incentivized by, I think revenue is a good one, but I also think like the profit margin. Like if we made a certain amount of revenue, but it was so expensive to actually do that it didn't really make a difference, and like I'm looking at that bottom line as a bootstrapper. I'm looking at that bottom line, maybe more than someone who has like a venture-backed business and they're thinking about top line. For me, I'm thinking about sort of the profitability of the business, revenue and profitability. And then also I think like net promoter score. So like the net promoter score is that like, we've all seen this question, is like, how likely are you to recommend this service to a friend? And so like, that's a metric that I'm like regularly tracking to see like how happy are our customers. I actually think the actual referral rate is even better than the net promoter score, but it kind of tells you directionally. If someone says like, 5 out of 10 or 3 out of 10, I'm not likely to recommend this. There's something for me to go look at and see and for us to get better as a team. So like those are metrics that are really important to me. I'm curious to hear if you have a job and you are listening to this, tell us in the comments. You can go to YouTube and comment and say like, what do you think are like the 1 or 2 metrics that your boss is incentivized by? It's okay if you're guessing, but like, what do you think is driving them that you could align yourself towards even better? Because I think this conversation is not limited just to entrepreneurship. It's just kind of about like making boss moves that are data centered in general. And you got to know where the ship, whether that's your boss or the company, is kind of headed directionally from numbers.
And also, I think it's different too, depending on the department. So, because if HR came to me and said, "This is how we can increase revenue," I'd be like, "What?" Well, you understand what I'm saying? Like, so I think that I think it's incentive. Like my ad department, they will be focused on revenue and or the content team. Or but HR, if my HR department came to me and said, "Hey, employee morale." You get what I'm saying? Like
right.
These are the, you know what I mean? Like it differs.
That's why you got to know kind of what your boss is incentivized by, because it's going to be different depending on your role. Okay. Exactly. I'm excited to see in the comments what people say, like they think their boss is incentivized by, because it could be like not even like a core business metric. It could be something else. It could be ego. It could be something else, right? That they're incentivized by. But I'm excited to hear what people say. Okay. Do you have thoughts on A/B testing?
No, I'm not that deep in it.
Okay. Like A/B testing, No, this is good. I actually like that, because like that you say that, because I talk to so many entrepreneurs and they're like, so A/B testing, if you're listening to this and you don't know, is like where you take like one version of something. Like let's say it's like one of your Shade Room Instagram posts, for example, and then you make a similar post. You do like 2 versions of them and you're like, which one's better, this caption or this caption? Which one's better if we like posted it this time or this time? Or like it can, and this can be not just for social media, like people A/B test stuff all the time. They run an advertisement for their business and they're like, should it be like this text or this text? Or on their website, should it be bold or should it be italic? Right? You can A/B test A versus B, which one's better. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs just get stuck in this, like they're early stage, they've not yet made $1 million a year in revenue. And they're just like A/B testing it. Which one's this way? Let me tweak it. There's this famous story about this guy there's a designer that worked at Google, and he left Google because he was pissed off because they kept doing these like ridiculous A/B tests. They did this like 41 shades of blue test where they like tried the ad in like 41 different shades of blue. And the reality is that like maybe there's a small difference. That one blue shade makes a small difference, but for the most part, it doesn't really make a big difference. And when you're starting as a business, like doing that little tweaking and testing, like probably is not moving you forward. It's more about what you were saying. The intuition is what gets you started. Maybe you don't have the right blue, but like it feels kind of gut right and you feel like this is kind of the right decision. Just lock in that decision and make it. Like I hear a lot of entrepreneurs trying to like tweak little thing when it really doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? I think for that, I use a lot of intuition.
Yeah.
Which maybe I should try some A/B testing just a little bit. I wouldn't go as far as that. You know what I mean? But yeah. I do use intuition, because there are times where we would do similar posts. It may not be the exact post, so it wouldn't qualify as A/B testing, but it'll be similar posts. And I can intuitively know what about the caption would make this more engaging just by the response from the audience. You understand what I'm saying? Like what they say. I will look at a post. It's probably obsessive. I will look at a post probably like 100 times because I want to know exactly why you laughed.
Yeah.
I want to know what you found funny about that. So I will go through every comment and be like, oh, I will hear what people say. Like, oh, that part. Oh, minute, 0.12 seconds, or da 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 da, or oh my God, she's in it. I will go and find out exactly what you found funny. Understand why you laugh, what makes you laugh. Go to your page, go to your stories, see your kind of humor.
Yeah.
I will do that, and then now I know for moving forward what's put in the caption, what to bring attention to in the video. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so that to me is more,
it's like a qualitative data point too, right? It's not a number, but like, people like this sentiment or like this thing is a qualitative insight that you can use to build any kind of business, right? It doesn't have to be a content business, but like people like this thing, they respond well to this tone, they respond well to this energy is a good way to get qualitative insights too. Okay, so
but see, when you do that, people sometimes don't know how to replicate it. I've seen so many people that are like, this one post went viral, but I don't know how to replicate that. You know what I mean? Why did this go viral? You understand what I'm saying? Like, what would you say to that to those people? Because I know I meet a lot of people that'll say, I had a nail business and then this one post went viral, but I've never been able to do it again.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I also think there's some element of social media algorithm that it's hard to just like, you could put the same exact post and it do really differently on a different day if you post it again. And so some of it is so hard to replicate. Like, I think actually this is a good example of where data is not useful because you're trying to like pinpoint exactly what it is that you did perfectly. And maybe it was just like the algorithm happened to take off on that day and that point and that moment. And some of it is not a data point. Like, I think trying so hard to get the data exactly right can sometimes steer you wrong.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? Like if someone's trying to like replicate, because you know a lot about posts that go viral.
We replicate a lot.
Okay, so how do you do this?
Thing, yeah. So because you have to think about it. For us to have gotten to this point, we've had a lot of viral posts.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? And that's what I do. That's what I use. I have to know why you found this funny. I have to know what your sense of humor is. I have to know what, you know what I'm saying? And once I'm able to study that post so much, I can now find another piece of content that I know would resonate with you.
Because it has that same type of humor, you're saying? Like it has the same style?
Yeah. Like, let me give you an example, right?
Yeah.
We did a post one time about Black doctors finding out their residencies, like, you know what I mean, announcing their residencies, right? Yeah. And it got such a visceral, like, strong response from the audience. People were like, I'm crying. And I was like, okay, why? Why are you crying? Like, why is this so meaningful to you? And I was seeing that, and I had to keep listening, going to their pages. And I was able to see that they love to see Black people winning in spaces where they're traditionally not represented in. Yeah. And they like to see the joy and the support from family around that. So then we were able to replicate that. So now it's doctors, then it's lawyers, then it's, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay. Now we're talking about lawyers here. You know what I'm saying? And so then we were able to get that viral post, you know, more than once, because we're like, we know what you want to see. We know what makes you cry. Well, tears of joy.
Yes.
Obviously.
No,
but
this is good. And I think what you're bringing up is like, don't just look at the quantitative data, also be looking at qualitative data of like, qualitative data is like, this is the sentiment, this is the vibe that people like, this is a knowledge that I have about what my customers like. I want to wrap this up by asking people to think about the qualitative insights for their current business or business they want to start too. So maybe you guys can come back to the comments. Tell us like one thing you know about your customer. You don't have to have data points on it. It could be exactly kind of how you're saying, like a gut knowing, or you read it somewhere, a knowing about like what customers want, like some insight about your customer, what they like, what they know, what they want. Because I think writing that out is a really good thread for like we were talking about earlier, which is like not just the data point, but the insight around it and being able to do something with it, a story you can tell around the data point, because just the data point itself ain't that useful.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last words you want to add about like things you advice you have for people who are trying to figure out in their entrepreneurship, like how much do I spend attention to data? How much do I not look at data and just be intuition? Any kind of parting thoughts on that?
If you are here and you have not yet started your business and you're taking all of this information in and you kind of feel overwhelmed and you're like, where do I start? Just start. That's it. Just start. Because I didn't have any insights. I didn't have any data. I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any knowledge in what I was doing. I just started. There's an element of, what you can control, and there's things outside of your control. If it's, if it's your destiny to do something, things will work itself out to get you to start, to get you to move. You understand what I'm saying? And so, like, at the time when I started the Shade Room, I was I never had considered media in my life. And if you would have told me then that I would be in media, I would have told you, be quiet. And no, absolutely not. That was not anything that I ever wanted to do. Never went to school for it or anything. And so I had no background or history in media. I had no background or history in building websites or anything like that, tech of any sort. I did graduate with a business degree with a 2.8 GPA, and I was kicked out of the business. I pledged for a business fraternity and was kicked out. You know what I mean? But anyway, what I'm trying to say is this, right? Is that I basically, by all standards, I was not the one for the job. You get what I'm saying? And I remember at that time I was on the websites and everybody was saying, don't go into blogging, because it was at a time when the .com was dying. Nobody was going to www.com anymore. And so all of the advice around me would have, if I had taken it to heart, I even remember going to the business office and she said, don't name your business the Shade Room. Nobody's going to write a check to the Shade Room. What I'm trying to say is that, like, if you take in too much, it can actually stunt and keep you stuck and make you not move at all. What's better than failing? What's worse than failing is not doing anything at all, not moving at all. So I would say move, do it, start it. You know what I mean? With whatever you have in your pot, and then figure it out along the way. It's okay. You know what I mean? Like, it is okay. How many people has it worked for? Nobody ever knew everything from the start. That's just that's not how this thing works.
And intuition first is okay, data second. Intuition first, data second, and that's okay.
What I'm saying is work with what you have in your pot.
Beautiful. Lovely. Thank you so much for coming on and kind of explaining your journey of working with data and making decisions around gut and intuition and doing it anyway. I think that's kind of what you're wrapping up with, is just like find a way to get going, whether that's intuition or data. Do one of the two and get something out there. I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, girl.
This was fun, though. This was fun.
Yeah.